Hello, one and all, and welcome to Film Fragments, a podcast where we take fragments of an actor, director, or genre and tell you our favorites from their catalog. My name is Bryan. I'm your host, and I'm very excited to welcome you guys to this episode of Film Fragments. We have a very special episode for you guys today. Today we're talking about an actor who's only been nominated for one Oscar, which is so disappointing. This is an actor that so many people respect, someone that I respect greatly, someone who's very versatile in his craft, and his name is Jake Gyllenhaal. Very sexy man, a very talented man, a very humbled man, just all around a fantastic performer. It is crazy to even comprehend how long this guy's been acting for. He's been acting in the business for nearly 30 years, been nominated for one Oscar, which again is so shocking. At this point, he should have at least 2 Oscars to his name, but we can't always get what we want, can we? It was such an honor to have Morgan Roberts from the Cinema Gals podcast to talk to me about her favorite Jake Gyllenhaal films. It was a great discussion, one that I'm very excited to share with you guys. And now, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 2 of Film Fragments, where I am joined by Morgan Roberts to talk about our favorite films from Jake Gyllenhaal. Enjoy. Hi, Morgan Roberts.
Hello, Bryan. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
I'm so excited to have you on here today. So, Morgan, you're a fellow film fan like me. You talk about movies a lot. You have a podcast where you talk about movies. So can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you come from? Talk a little bit about your Cinema Gals podcast and talk about what got you into film. Why do you love film so much?
Yeah, that's funny that you asked that question, because that is what we ask all of our guests for the first time, of what got them into film on the Untitled Cinema Gals project, which is, we call it Cinema Gals because it is too long to say. But I grew up in a family who really loved film. Both my parents, when I was very little, worked at film studios. And so we were inundated with like movies and all of that fun stuff. And it was also like pretty much like my babysitter growing up. My mom would put on any film and just be like, watch this. And I'm like, great, will do. And so I grew up out West. I currently live on the East Coast, and my day job is not in film whatsoever. So film has always kind of been my like self-care way I process the craziness of the world type of thing. And so for the past like 3 or 4 years, I've been doing freelance writing and fun podcast stuff. And the Cinema Gals podcast is me and my friend Chelsea rambling about movies. We have some very interesting takes. I mean, we did an entire episode on A24 coming of age films.
Ooh.
And we discussed how 8th Grade is not only a coming of age film, but also a horror film, because being a 13-year-old is the scariest thing in the world.
Absolutely.
We have fun. We did a whole episode on Godzilla versus Kong, which is Chelsea's favorite coming of age film. And if you listen to our podcast, you will hear her argument on why it's a coming of age film.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Look,
I wasn't too big on that film, but hey, if you love it, you love it.
Yeah, I mean, she had a very good and creative argument, so I would recommend listening. I've
never heard anyone think of that movie like that, but I mean, hey, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also the person that calls Doubt a Christmas movie, so we just.
I mean, you're not wrong with that. I mean, you're not wrong with that. You're not wrong with that.
Yeah, but do you put it in between A Muppet Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life? I don't know.
I mean, that's a great triple feature.
Exactly.
So to go on to our topic today of Jake Gyllenhaal, Why do you think Jake Gyllenhaal is regarded as one of the best actors working today? Everyone looks at him as a very beautiful looking man, and he is very gorgeous. But why do you think everyone loves him so much when it comes to his acting choices? The guy has tackled so many genres. He's done pretty much everything. I can't really think of a genre that he hasn't tackled yet. Like, he's done comedies and dramas, action, thriller, horror movies. He even played the Marvel supervillain. So he's done pretty much everything. So why do you think a lot of people love Jake Gyllenhaal so much, and what makes you such a big fan of his catalog of work?
I've been a fan of his probably since I saw October Sky in school. It was before Finding Nemo became really big. October Sky was like that movie that they would show in class.
In school, yeah.
Yeah. When your teacher was out and the substitute was like, I don't know what we're doing. Turns on a movie. But I think one of the things about Jake Gyllenhaal, and there are a few other actors that I would also put in this category, people like Paul Dano, Daniel Kaluuya, Denzel Washington, that are actors that take their craft and profession very seriously to the point where they're actually acting. Because I think that unfortunately, not to be gendered here, but I think that on average, male actors don't have the same expectation that female actors do. And, I always look at something like Matthew McConaughey winning an Oscar for really just losing a whole bunch of weight and not being homophobic. So, that bar is really low. And then if you look at, best actress categories, every single one of those performances truly deserves to be there most times. And you can also name a dozen other women who, if they took one of the 5 slots, you would totally be interested in it. And so I think that Jake Gyllenhaal is one of those actors that is continually raising the bar for himself and for other male actors of like, this is what we do. We are supposed to be, challenging ourselves with every role. And so I've always, as you said, he's done everything from one of my favorite films as a kid, The Day After Tomorrow, to then seeing him the following year in Brokeback Mountain. Like, he really, if we haven't lost Heath Ledger, I think that Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal would just be like blazing the screens together in the fun, weird choices that they always make.
Yeah, they could have been like a very cool pairing. Like, they could have done so many things together. They kind of could have been like a Paul Newman, Robert Redford type of pairing. That would have been like the really cool pairing. Like, yeah, I agree with you on Jake. He is an actor that definitely like commits to his craft. Like, he always gives it 110%, even when he's doing the most ridiculous roles ever, like his role in Okja or his role in something ridiculous like Ambulance even. Like, he always commits to his craft, regardless of the project that he's in. And he's worked with these countless amount of filmmakers. I like how you brought up Paul Dano, because he's worked with Paul Dano before.
Yep.
Twice, actually, both acted and with Paul Dano behind the camera. So I like that. We might talk about that later on in the episode. I'm not going to say it, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
exactly.
And I love Jake Gyllenhaal a lot. Like, I'm a big fan of his work. I get excited whenever he's attached to a project. And I'm really excited to talk with you about our favorite films from him.
Yeah. I'm super excited to be able to talk about him because, he really is just this great actor. And I find a lot of the women working today to be very diverse and show really great care in their craft.
Absolutely.
And I don't find it always with men. And so the fact that since I was 13 years old, I have seen an actor like Jake Gyllenhaal really raise the bar has always been like a gift.
Absolutely. So the way this is going to work, guys, we're going to go through our 5 through 1. So if Morgan says a film that's higher on my list, after she talks about it, I'm going to say pass. The same goes for her. If I talk about a film afterwards, she could say if she passes or if it's not on her list. So Morgan, I have to ask you the very important question. What is your number 5 favorite Jake Gyllenhaal film of all time?
My number 5 is Okja, because kind of as you had alluded to, it is such a weird, wild performance. And I love it so much just because of that. I don't know, like, did you watch, is Okja on your list, number 1?
It's not on my list.
Okay. So then when you were kind of sold on like this Bong Joon-ho film, like, what were you expecting Jake Gyllenhaal to be doing in it?
I'll be really honest. I didn't watch any trailers going into that movie, so I only knew like the basic premise of this girl who lost her gigantic pet pig, and I'm like, I liked Snowpiercer, so the premise sounds kind of crappy, but I'll watch. Why not? And I ended up being pretty riveted by it. Regarding, I had no idea what they were going for. So I was just, I had no anticipation. So then when I was watching the movie, Jake Gyllenhaal was, the crazy, eccentric, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Okja. I'm like, oh, so this is what he's going for. Well, anyone that is Jake could pull it off. So why not?
Yeah, exactly. And I just like the weird, just like body, like the weird movements he would make. One of my favorites is when he climbs up that hill and he's literally just drenched in sweat, and just like the faces he's making that whole time are just it's like comedic and somehow slightly frightening. And yeah, that performance, I've always been drawn to that.
Yeah, that's a very good film. It's a really good film. Coming to Criterion Collection soon. Very excited to pick that up when that comes out. Yeah, Okja, I only saw it once. I saw it when it came out a few years ago on Netflix, and I really enjoyed it. I'm a big Bong Joon-ho fan. I'm starting to really like immerse myself into his work. Parasite is like one of my favorite films ever. I was obsessed with that movie when it came out. I still am to this day. Yeah, his performance in Okja, I'll be honest, when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, it makes me cringe, but I feel like that's the attention. So I guess he did a good job of it. But then I thought about it over time, and I'm like, yeah, it was a pretty great supporting performance. And it, like you brought up with the comedic timing, like Jake Gyllenhaal is one of those actors that really has great comedic timing. And he hasn't done a lot of comedies, which is really unfortunate because he could really shine in a great comedy if it's written well and directed well. And he's also able to play frightened characters very well, which is something that we'll definitely touch upon more throughout this episode. Yeah, Okja is a great pick, truly. I just have to load my list. My list disappeared. Okay, number 5. Speaking of very weird, bonkers, wild stuff, I'm going to talk about a film where we see not only one Jake Gyllenhaal, but 2 Jake Gyllenhaals, and that is Enemy, directed by Denis Villeneuve. This movie has been analyzed to the core. Jake Gyllenhaal plays a teacher. He's very depressed. He's like confused about so many different things. And one night he rents this movie where the lead actor looks exactly like him. And he's like, I think I found my doppelganger. And usually whenever I watch a project where an actor plays 2 versions or multiple versions of themselves, I get a little concerned that it's going to be very goofy, over the top, and it's not going to work. And the beautiful thing about Enemy is that it's a very realistic approach to it, even though it's very thought-provoking and mind-bending. And I have to commend him for, pulling off both of these roles very seamlessly, very beautifully. I'm a big Denis Villeneuve fan. He's one of the best filmmakers working today. I've loved everything that he's directed so far that I've seen. And Enemy is one of those films that really does not get the attention that it deserves. And I think that if someone out there is a massive fan of Jake Gyllenhaal, I mean, heck, you're going to be very happy that you see 2 of him throughout the movie. So, I mean, that should make this at the top of your list. It's a very wild film, very quiet film at the same time, too. And it's very slow. It takes its time building up and everything to an ending that I'm still just analyzing greatly to this day. I mean, the movie came out like 8 years ago, and I'm still thinking about that ending. Like that ending, it took forever for it to leave my brain after I watched it for the first time. Like it was just stuck in my brain for days upon days upon days. And I don't know, it's just a good example to me of like someone that's, struggling and like unsure of where they belong, and like they're tired of what's going on in their life and they just want something new for a change. And when he sees this doppelganger and meets this doppelganger of his, I mean, it changes everything for the better, maybe for the worse. I'm not going to spoil anything in case you guys haven't seen the movie, because not many people have seen this movie, which is unfortunate because, Jake Gyllenhaal, Denis Villeneuve, great pairing. I love Enemy. I think it's one of the best films that came out this past decade. I know a lot of people are very like hit or miss with it. It's probably the Denis Villeneuve film that like you either like it or you don't like it, because all of his other films, I would say, are pretty much universally loved by critics and audiences. Maybe Dune wasn't like the high ball for audiences because it was too long. It was one half of a movie, blah, blah, blah. But I love Enemy. Is this on your list or is it not?
It is an honorable mention on my list. But yeah, it does not make my top 5. I do love the film. I love the performances. And I think one of the things that I liked so much about it was he does some moments that are extremely restrained to kind of help build the tension. And I think it was just so smart in the ways in which he himself was building tension on his own performance. And I just, you're having to balance these two characters. You're having to tell this story that has so much depth to it that's not just explicitly told to you. And I just, you kind of hit the nail on the head of, this is probably Villeneuve's one of his best works that is certainly overlooked. And Jake Gyllenhaal does something special having to play these multiple characters. And he's done it before. He's done it a couple of times. Like I know Nocturnal Animals, we see him kind of tackle.
Yeah, we see two versions of him. Yeah.
But I think that Enemy kind of does a much better job.
Absolutely.
Of utilizing his talent and his kind of his innate understanding of the plot and his characters. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I never looked at Spires the same way again. That's all I'll say after that. So now going into our number 4 what is your pick?
All right. My number 4 is a very important film, Brokeback Mountain. I remember watching this film. I was too young to watch it the first time I saw it. I think I must have been 14, maybe 15, because my parents had HBO and my mom let me watch what I wanted, as long as if there was troubling content, I talked to her. I don't know what it means, but her stellar parenting allowed me to watch this film very early on in my adolescence and the beginning of my own movie exploration. And I was really just bowled over by what Jake Gyllenhaal was doing in it, because this was kind of at the height of him being this pretty boy that everyone wanted to just kind of put in their films and have like this, his sparkling blue eyes and that big round face. And, Brokeback Mountain was such a shift from that narrative. And he really built this character and built this relationship with Heath Ledger that was so beautiful. And I just, it was one of those performances that, even 15 plus years later, I can still think of when after they've, towards the end of the film where he and Heath Ledger kind of have like a heated argument, just the, raw emotion, also trying to be strong in that moment and just balancing all of these, polar opposite, matters of fact at the same time was just amazing. And I can't believe that is his only Oscar nomination. Only one. It's a shame, but.
Yeah, unfortunately, Brokeback Mountain is just right outside the top 5. It's like right there. I only saw it once. I've been wanting to watch it again for years. And I think that if I were to watch it now, it would be like watching it again for the first time, because like you, I watched it when I was like maybe like 15, 16 years old. So it's been almost 10 years since I last saw it. And I remember being floored by those two performances, those two lead performances. And I know that a lot of people, when they watched The Dark Knight, they were like, man, we really lost Heath Ledger. Like, what a terrible loss. But honestly, for me, I really think this was the film that made me go, it's so devastating that he's not here anymore, because a talent taken from us way too soon. Like, those two performances are unbelievable. They are so great together. And I bought the relationship. The chemistry felt real and genuine. It didn't feel fake. It didn't feel gimmicky. It didn't feel like a performance. I felt like I was watching these two guys in an actual relationship. Like I felt like I was watching the characters. I wasn't watching Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal. I was watching them. And yeah, don't even get me started on the whole fact that this is his only Oscar nomination. I mean, that is ridiculous, like, to even comprehend. I mean, that's a discussion that we'll definitely be talking about later on in this episode. But Brokeback Mountain is great. Ang Lee is a very underrated director. When he hits, he really knocks it out of the park. And this is one of his best films for sure. Like when he does like this, or Life of Pi, or The Ice Storm, like when he hits, he really knocks it out of the park. And it's great that this film took home the directing Oscar. But again, like another very, on the last episode, we talked about how ridiculous it was that Saving Private Ryan didn't win Best Picture. How did this film, how did all the other films that were nominated lose to Crash? Like, come on.
It is that the preferential ranking thing is such a screwy, I mean, I understand the benefits of it, but man, does it screw over and make things like Crash and Green Book win Best Picture when they shouldn't have ever even been considered to begin with.
Crash is, I'll be really upfront, I don't think Crash is the worst movie in the world. I just don't see it as a Best Picture winner, especially when you look at the films that were nominated alongside it, and even other films that came out that year. Like, I'll be honest, the only other Best Picture, like Brokeback Mountain, it's not my favorite movie, but I think it's more deserving of a Best Picture winner than Crash. Crash shouldn't have even been nominated. Like, what about that film spoke, oh, this is an Oscar-winning film for Best Picture? Like, nothing screamed Best Picture winner. It's so similar to the whole Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare in Love thing. And also, be honest, like, when you look at the Best Picture winners, like, just in general, and regardless of when they came out, Crash was talked about for a short period of time, and then no one talked about it ever again. People still talk about Brokeback Mountain to this day. Like, when you look at Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan, everyone still talks about Saving Private Ryan. Like, if you go up to the street, and one of my guests last episode made this a very good point. If you go up to the street and ask 100 people if they've seen Saving Private Ryan, most of them would probably say yes. Or if they say they haven't seen it, they're like, oh, I've heard of it. How many people would you go up to and say that they've heard of Shakespeare in Love? Probably not that many. Yeah.
I mean, Shakespeare in Love is not the worst thing to top. I mean, would it have been my preferred Best Picture? No, but it's not a horrible film.
I'm sure it's not, but Crash shouldn't have been nominated, shouldn't have won.
Crash was problematic even in 2005. And the fact that it won Best Picture over a film that was not problematic, that was very nuanced in trying to understand sexuality and shame and stigma and societal expectations and gender roles. The fact that, again, this horrendous film that was so tone deaf in trying to examine race and privilege beat it. I don't understand. Again, same as Green Book winning. It is a film that is utilized to try to make white people not feel bad about racism. It was Crash all over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's still like one of the biggest Oscar upsets, at least in my lifetime. Like, I could think of many, but that's definitely like one of the top like 3 for sure, because I mean, people still talk about that to this day. Like, there are Oscar upsets that people talk about as soon as they happen, but then like they're brushed under. They don't get talked about as much because they aren't as
egregious.
exactly. And this one is one of the biggest ones in my lifetime for sure. But moving away from that and talking about my number 4, I'm going to go with a film that I think is very underrated. And I will tell you that when I walked into this movie, when it came out, I thought it looked so stupid. It looked so generic. It looked so cliched. But then I realized you can't always trust marketing with this. My number 4 is Source Code. And I have to say that the thing about Source Code that turned me off from it at first, I'm like, oh, this is just Groundhog Day, but on a train. Oh, great. Whoopee. And I like Jake Gyllenhaal, but no. But instead, what it was a very clever, interesting action thriller. Yes, it did take that approach, stuck in the time loop approach, but it stood out on its own because we hadn't seen anything like that before with that kind of concept mixed with sci-fi and action and thriller and everything. Because the only time we really got it was with Groundhog Day, and that's just a comedy and a great one too. But Source Code, I think, benefits really greatly from its awesome direction by Duncan Jones and Jake's performance. He's very charismatic. He's very likable. There's a lot of stuff going on with his character that I'm not going to spoil. A very cool twist, by the way, like really on the edge of your seat twist, a twist that I wasn't expecting whatsoever. I think the banter with him and Michelle Monaghan is great. Vera Farmiga, who I think is one of the more underrated performers we have right now. I think she was great in this film. And the visuals were great. It was a fun blockbuster for the popcorn audiences, but it was also a very smart movie too. How often do you really get that when you go see a big budget blockbuster? I can't really think of many on the top of my head. Maybe you could list off a few, but I love Source Code. It's so underappreciated. No one ever talks about it, which is so sad because it has Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a very cool premise. It's so entertaining. It's so exciting. And I think one of the biggest gulps that I ever made in the movie theater was the first time he jumped off the train as it was moving, and he just rolled around. Like, I just gulped so loud in the theater. And I heard so many. I remember going to see it at a packed house. I went with my parents and my sister, and we were all just like, what the fuck? Like, it was just insane. And I love that movie. It's so, so good. So are you going to pass, or is this not on your list?
This is not, this is one of like the 5 Jake Gyllenhaal movies that I've not seen because I was in
You're missing out. You're missing out.
And so I could only, when you're in school, you can only go to so many movies at a time.
Of course.
And because to me, what I'm hearing is that it was The Edge of Tomorrow before The Edge of Tomorrow kind of stole its thunder. And I'm, straight up not a Tom Cruise fan. So the fact that I sat through The Edge of Tomorrow and didn't hate myself probably means that Source Code is going to go towards the top of my list on things to go back and watch because, that sounds really dope. And you're right. The marketing for that film was terrible because I understand how you can't give away everything in a plot like that, but man.
which I commend because I was going into the movie expecting one thing. I was like, oh, I'm gonna know the outcome of this movie right away, like he saves the world, blah blah blah. But then there was more to it that I wasn't expecting because they didn't really tell us anything about his character in the trailer. Like, I will commend the marketing team for hiding that. So maybe deep down they did do a good job at hiding all the important factors. But the trailers were terrible. Like, they weren't good trailers. And you could see a bad trailer for a good movie. And you could even see great trailers for really bad movies. Like, it's a common thing that happens in Hollywood. But you loving Jake Gyllenhaal, you should definitely put that at the top of your list. It's so fun. It's like, you could shut your brain off, have a good time, enjoy Jake Gyllenhaal looking beautiful, running around trying to save people on a train. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. He's hanging out with Michelle Monaghan and Vera Farmiga. So sold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now going into our number 3s, what is your pick?
So my number 3 is a much smaller Jake Gyllenhaal role, but also a film that I love so much. So I had to put it on my list somewhere, and that is 2018's Wildlife. He has a very, very small role in this film, but I think, this is Paul Dano's directorial debut. He's working with Carey Mulligan, who he has worked with before. And I think when he is around, because his character is fighting a fire in Montana for most of the film, but when he is kind of in the picture, he is like in the picture. Like, you really understand his relationship with Carey Mulligan's character. You understand his idea of parenthood. You understand his existential crisis without him having to even say a whole bunch of like, I'm not well kind of thing. And yeah, there's an argument scene between him and Carey Mulligan when he finally comes back that just, like, you knew it was coming. You know that it's going to come because they've been on these two very different journeys, and now they have to come back together, and it's not what it used to be. And it's so good. That last scene is the best.
I love Wildlife. I love Wildlife so much. It unfortunately did not make the list. I watched it for the first time about a year ago. I missed it when it came out in theaters. It didn't come like really anywhere in Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Criterion came out, I bought it during one of the sales. And one of the best directorial debuts I've seen in a very long time, and I would say one of the best films directed by an actor that I think I've ever seen too. Like, Paul Dano is already like one of the best talents we have working today.
Oh yeah.
Zoe Kazan is also amazing. So them working together to craft this movie with in my opinion, two of the best actors working today. I love Jake, obviously, and I'm a big fan of Carey Mulligan. I'm a huge fan of her. And I love a good period piece. I love watching films set in a different time area. Like, you felt like you were in this time. It didn't feel like, when you watch certain movies set in a different time, and it feels very modernized. Like, it doesn't, you don't look like you're in the time period. With Wildlife, you feel like this is the 60s, right? This is when it takes place, right?
Yeah.
You feel like you're in the 60s. Everything, like the clothes, the locations, like it feels like the music, like everything, you feel like you're in the 60s. And Jake's performance, his short time on screen is obviously very crucial, but he is great when he's on screen. And I really liked how that character was written because he was going through an existential crisis of his own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was trying to find, they obviously moved to this town. He was trying to find a job. He had a job, and then they let him go. And then they tried to get him to go back, but he wasn't happy with the conditions. And then when he finds this opportunity, he's like, maybe this is what I'm meant to do. Even though I have to leave behind my wife and child, this is what I feel I have to do. And it's a really great film. Yeah, I love Wildlife. I've recommended it to so many people. Sadly, most of them have not cared for it, but the ones that have cared for it, I appreciate you very much. No, I love Wildlife. It's a great film, and I cannot wait to see Paul Dano direct more. I really hope he gets to do another project behind the camera because he's already an exceptional actor. And I really think that, I think this film should have been nominated for something. I think the screenplay should have gotten recognized. Like, the screenplay was one of the best from that year. And I agree with you. The last scene, the last shot of all three of them. Oh my God. One of the best final shots in a movie I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, it is. And as you said, Paul Dano, Zoe Kazan wrote it together. And Zoe Kazan is a fantastic playwright for anyone listening.
She's so good. She's so good at writing. She's so good.
Her plays, I don't understand how she can keep everything so tight while also making everything feel so lived in. So Jake Gyllenhaal, I think, does so much subtle work because his character is not like this bombastic, loud person. Like, he struggles with his emotions.
He adds a lot of restraintness to a lot of his performances. That's a very common thing when you watch him. Like, he could play those very bombastic, loud characters, But like here, it's so subtle and restrained and very quiet and nuanced. Like he does that he seamlessly. He could like shift from this to that like that. It's uncanny. It's incredible how he's able to do it.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you continually recommend Wildlife, because I saw it. It was playing in one theater in my area. I took a bus to our downtown area to go watch this movie.
You know you're serious when you take a bus to go see a movie.
I mean, well, the buses in my area, it is, a trek, but I took this bus and then cried the whole way home because it's just what a great movie it is. So,
and I also want to shout out Ed Oxenbould, one of the best child performances I've seen in forever. Great child performance, fantastic. I was annoyed with him in The Visit, and then when I saw he was in this, I'm like, oh, it's that kid. Well, I trust Paul Dano, and he was unbelievable. He was great.
Oh, yeah.
Like on the same level as like two acting giants like Jake and Carrie. Like it's impressive. If you're a child actor and you could be on the same level as like really top tier talent, then you know you're going to be a good actor, hopefully for the rest of your career. I'm very excited to see what happens with Ed Oxenbould in the future, because he really was on a whole other level. Yeah, that film is really, really great. So my number 3, I'm going to go with another Jake Gyllenhaal, Denis Villeneuve collaboration, that is Prisoners. You want to talk about movies that leave a very sick feeling in your stomach? This is one of those movies for sure. I remember going to see this movie knowing that it was going to be a very hard movie to watch. Like I knew that it was going to drain a lot out of me. From the trailers alone, I was like, this is going to be one of those movies, but it looks like it's going to be an incredible showcase for the performers, the beautiful imagery from Roger Deakins. And no one really knew who Denis Villeneuve was at that point. I'll be honest, I never heard of Denis Villeneuve when that movie came out. Were you like well-rounded with him prior to Prisoners coming out, or was this like your first exposure to him as well?
I think because Prisoners came out after Enemy, correct?
It was like around the same time. It was like the same time.
Because I remember seeing Enemy and then Sicario, and then I think I went and revisited Prisoners.
Got you. Yeah, I was like, oh, who's this Denis Villeneuve guy? I never heard of him. But I'm like, well, I like pretty much everybody in the cast. Like, it's a great cast assembled at Paul Dano. We just brought up Paul Dano, coincidentally. But yeah, I love this movie so much. It's a great psychological thriller drama. It's a fantastic movie. And Denis' direction, I mean, you feel disgusted the entire time you're watching this movie. And just when you think there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope, it goes away immediately. Goes away right away. You're so immersed into this world. You really are just glued to these performances. Every character in this movie is broken in their own way. Every single one of them. And when you have a project where you're able to show the brokenness of them so seamlessly, then you did a great job. The entire cast across the board is phenomenal. And it's a great cast too. I mean, like, if you look at the cast for this movie, there's at least one actor you like. Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Viola Davis, Terrence Howard, Paul Dano, Maria Bello, Melissa Leo. Great cast, like fantastic cast, fantastic lineup. And not to like go and talk about a different actor, but I personally think that this may be Hugh Jackman's best performance that I've ever seen. And I have to really think about that, because there's that. I was a big fan of his work in Bad Education. Les Mis, everybody seems to hate, but I thought he was amazing in it. And his performance in particular is why I adored the movie so much. Like, he plays the broken father who just wants to find his kid so perfectly. And you feel sympathy for him, but you're also not, because of the actions that he does in this movie, especially the Paul Dano's character. Like, the stuff with Paul Dano in this movie, the shower stuff, it gives me chills to this day. Like, that is absolutely terrifying stuff. But to talk about Jake, very quiet performance. He has his moments where he's explosive and very in your face. You know, there's a sequence where he goes up to Paul Dano and everything in the interrogation room, and it's a phenomenal performance. And this film is incredible. One of the scariest scenes of this movie, and I mean, there's so many to name. One of the scariest scenes is when he's going into that home and then he finds that case that has like all those bugs in it. I don't know if it's like snakes. I don't really remember, but that still gives me chills to this day. And obviously, without spoiling anything, the ending, I know there were a lot of people that were pissed off with it ending open-ended, like you're left up in the air figuring out what happened to a certain character, but I think it ended really well. And I kind of like that it wasn't a clear-cut ending. I like that the ending was for the audience to interpret whether or not so-and-so survives and so-and-so is found. And I adore this movie so much. It's one of the best like psychological thriller dramas of the past 10 years. And Roger Deakins' imagery, I mean, is on a whole other level. It's shot so beautifully, and it launched Denis Villeneuve into notoriety here in the States. And I really adore this movie. Are you going to pass, or is this not on your list?
That it is not on my list. I have found in my old age that I am not drawn to like super violent kind of like men yelly movies. And so I totally understand people's love for this film because it does have some top-notch performances, and I would literally die for Viola Davis. I love that woman so much.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. But it just, I think, especially looking at some of Villeneuve's other work, like it is much lower on my list. And yeah, I think Jake's great in it. I also think that there were some parts of it that is just like, it feels a little bit over the top in how violent or like how crass that we're being right now. Like, I understand it. We don't have to keep doing it.
I just disappeared.
Yeah.
I just disappeared off my own show.
Well, your Wi-Fi apparently doesn't like that. I am not a big Prisoners fan, but I appreciate the film for like the artistic approaches to it, Roger Deakins, the actors giving it their all. But yeah.
Well, I respect your opinion from what I got from it. So now going into our number twos, I hope it recorded everything. So now going into our number twos, what is your pick for number two?
Number two is a film that I am still angry he was not nominated for Best Actor for, and it is Stronger, where he plays one of the survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing. And I think that his work is just so amazing and incredible. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about this film is that even though very frequently when we look at survivors of traumatic events of, like these horrible, public, sorry, I hope my mic didn't pick up the person who is, needs to drive really fast. One of the things that I always find happens with films where we are looking at survivors of traumatic events, like societal traumatic events, is that we always paint them as like these incredible heroes. And it's like they were people before that event happened, and they are people afterwards, which means that they're complex, that everything that they do is not good just because they survived this moment. And so I think what Jake did with this film was not shy away from the fact that like this guy kind of strung this woman along for a while, that he kind of struggled taking responsibility for his own actions. And just because he now survived this bombing doesn't mean that the way that he lives has changed. Like, he still struggles with his own accountability. He still struggles with responsibility. And there's a scene with him and Tatiana Maslany where she tells him that she's pregnant and he flees. Like, his whole thing is he can't physically run away, but he metaphorically is running away from the situation as fast as he can. And it is so heartbreaking because it's like, gosh, you would hope that your life would almost ended and you would want to change how you live, but that's not really how people work. And I just think that he gave so much nuance and texture to this person, and not only showed his resilience, but showed kind of those weaknesses that were present the entire time in that person.
Unfortunately, I have not seen Stronger. It's one that I really wanted to see when it came out, and I just haven't been able to. I totally forgot about that movie. I really wanted to see it when it came out. I'm a big Boston guy. I love Boston. I have a Red Sox hat on right now.
Yes,
I love Boston so much. And yeah, I mean, I've watched some clips from the movie, and it definitely broke my heart. And his performance, I mean, I'm really upset that he didn't get nominated for this movie. Like, and I haven't even seen the full movie. Like, that's just, like, when you're someone that says that and you hadn't even seen the full movie, I mean, that's like, that says a lot about the performance. It looks great, and I heard it was great, and I trust your recommendation, so I definitely do want to check it out down the road. I really wanted to see it, and I just never got a chance to.
I have Source Code on my list. You now have Stronger on your list.
Yes,
we will fix this.
Absolutely. So now my number 2. I think when it comes to discussions about actors not being nominated for roles, I think one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one of the past 10 years, is everybody talking about why Jake Gyllenhaal, who had been nominated everywhere else for this particular movie, didn't make it into the 5 best actor race. Number 2 is Nightcrawler. And I think universally, a lot of people agree that this is a performance that really should have been nominated. And I, like you, I'm not a big fan of when people get Oscars for losing weight or gaining weight or whatever. Now, Jake Gyllenhaal, interestingly enough, wasn't required to lose weight. He chose to do it himself because he wanted to look like a coyote in the night searching for stuff, which is a very interesting analogy to this character. I think that this movie is so terrifying and so despicable and so disgusting. It just leaves you feeling sick. And Jake's performance is very transformative. It's a very terrifying performance. And it's one of the best performances he's ever given. I personally think, and this is just my opinion, of course, I think this might be the best acting he's ever done. And I don't want to sound cliche. It has nothing to do with the weight loss. The weight loss doesn't matter. He could have looked physically fit. And if he acted the same way, it still would have been a great performance to me. That character of Lou Bloom is a very well-written character. And Jake's just gives it 110%. He's very, manipulative. You don't know what he's going to do. You never know what his next move is going to be. The entire time you're watching the movie, you're like, oh my God, what is this guy going to do next? What's he going to do now? What is going to happen this time? You never know. You're on the edge of your seat. And his performance is just so magnetic and so great. I love it so much. I don't know how he wasn't nominated for this. And I have a whole theory about that, but I'll talk about that later on. But that performance should have been recognized. He didn't have to win. I would have been okay if he didn't win, but a nomination would have been incredibly deserving. The supporting cast surrounding him is great. I love Renee Russo here. She is so, so good. The banter between them is really, really great. The back and forth between them is really great. And I miss Bill Paxton dearly. His role is very small in this movie. He was good too. And Riz Ahmed, this was my first time I had ever seen him in anything, and he was awesome as Rick. He was great. He should have been nominated for supporting actor, I think. That was an amazing performance from him. The gritty nighttime look of LA is something that I like to see a lot in these movies. It reminded me a little bit of Collateral from Michael Mann, like very grimy approach to nighttime life in LA. And a lot of the sequences do take place, like it's very dark at night, but the sequences that take place during the day are kind of saturated. I don't know if you get that vibe, but like they're very bright. Like it feels like it's a completely different movie. The imagery here is just on a whole other level. It's so crazy that the only nomination this movie got at the Oscars was for its script. A great script, but how do you not nominate the lead actor? In my humble opinion, I feel that the way it should have worked, and this is just my opinion, for best actor, I wanted Michael Keaton to win for Birdman. I liked Eddie Redmayne, The Theory of Everything, but Michael Keaton was that's who I was rooting for the most that year. Same. And I would have easily put Jake Gyllenhaal in the top 5. My thing is, regardless of how one feels about the movie, Steve Carell should not have been in the lead actor race. That was not a lead performance. That was a supporting performance. I would have just put him in supporting and then give that 5th spot to Jake. Like, I would have kept Michael. I would have kept Eddie. I liked Cumberbatch in Imitation Game. I'm a big Cumberbatch fan, so sure, I'll keep him. And then who else was nominated with him? Oh my God. Sniper? Bradley Cooper? I'm not really big on that movie, but he was good in it. No, Jake Gyllenhaal should have been nominated. Like, it's really sickening how he wasn't nominated for this. Like, arguably, a lot of people said this might be the best acting he's ever done, and he really, like, if you want to give an Oscar to someone that loses weight, that's actually not just for losing weight. I mean, like, this is one of those performances that works even with the weight loss. Like I said, if he was physically jacked and played the character the exact same way that he played this role, it would have been a great performance. And that mirror shot where he's screaming, I mean, top acting. Yeah, I love Nightcrawler.
Yeah, Nightcrawler, just because I felt I had an inkling that you would put it on your list. And so it fell just below mine because it's really hard to pick just 5 Jake Gyllenhaal performances.
It is so difficult to pick just 5. Like, it's...
Yeah, but yeah, I 100%. Like, the fact that I think that's one of the things about Jake Gyllenhaal that I really appreciate is that he makes choices that aren't necessarily like being presented to him, but I want to consciously create this type of atmosphere. I think so much about Enemy as a great example of him using his physicality in different manners for those characters. And like, he didn't have to, like, that's not required of him to make all of these subtle changes between these 2 characters. But he's like, I'm going to build so many different subtle differences between these 2, and I'm going to keep track of them. And so I think, like, with Nightcrawler, the fact that, he really changed his physical appearance to create this character that most of their existence is in this very seedy, dark underworld of, a place that we have synonymous with, like, fame and glamour, I think was just, it's, brilliant. It's him just doing great work.
Yeah, and the scene that really gets to me the most is when he has that scene with Renee Russo where he's telling her what he wants. The name of my company is Video Production News, a professional news gathering service. That's how it should be read, and that's how it should be said. Like, that whole monologue was just incredible. Now, when I say that I want something, I mean that I want it, and I don't want to have to ask again. Like, just those eyes, like him being skinny, like his eyes just pop, and it's utterly terrifying. It's a very terrifying performance. Oh my God. Like, I cannot believe that he was not nominated for this. Like, that is just sickening. It's sickening that he was not nominated for this. And usually I don't like to get riled up when something isn't nominated at the Oscars, but like, this is an instance where he absolutely 100% should have been nominated, especially considering he was nominated literally everywhere else. Every other outlet, organization, the Golden Globes, the SAGs, the BAFTAs, Critics' Choice, everyone nominated him. And the Oscars didn't, and it's just so sad. It's so sad.
Yep. No, 100% agree. It's I like that our number 2 picks were both films that I think he should have easily been nominated for.
Absolutely. And honestly, I would have been very happy if he won for this. Again, I was rooting for Michael Keaton that year, but if Jake won his first Oscar for this performance, it would have been a very deserving win.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have felt like a career win. It would have felt like a way of honoring the performance. You know how when as certain actors, you know, they've been nominated so many times and then they win Oscars just for their careers. Like, I love Leo. I liked The Revenant, but that was not his best performance. And, you know, say what you want about Will Smith now, but that was also not his. Well, I feel like that win was more so for his career as opposed to the performance itself.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
You know, it is what it is. So now going into our number ones, our favorite Jake Gyllenhaal films of all time. I am really curious to know Morgan's number one. So Morgan, what is your favorite Jake Gyllenhaal film of all time?
My favorite Jake Gyllenhaal film is one from early on in his career. It's a little film called Donnie Darko. And I love that film so much. I was very annoying about how much I loved that film when I was in high school. But I think that film has honestly some of the best performances by so many actors in there. I mean, the fact it has Jenna Malone, it has Drew Barrymore, it has Noah Wyle. I think Seth Rogen.
Very weird cast. Seth Rogen's even in it.
Yeah.
So weird.
It's such a weird, like when you look at like where everyone's career branched out after that film, you're just like, what? Okay. But I love, number one, I love the fact that he worked with his sister, Maggie.
Oh, absolutely.
They got to play brother and sister, that they got to, you know, kind of be weird together. And that literally her opening line is, "I'm voting for Dukakis," which is like such a great and easy way to be like, we're in the 80s, folks. Like, this is where we are. But I mean, like, I loved them playing off of each other. I loved his, like, he plays such a weird kid. He plays such a weirdo, but does it in such a way that's not like, oh, you think that he's going to harm people. You're actually so worried about what others are going to do to him because of just kind of how odd and out there and strange he is. And I just, you know, I love the scenes that he has with his therapist. I just think that there was so much in that film that he got to do that you know, to have that be one of the early films of your career, I think is tremendously impressive. Because most people have to wait a really long time before they get to make bold, wild choices in a movie. And it was one of my favorite performances when I was younger. It's one of those films that every time I revisit it, I'm finding something that I didn't catch the first time. And that was kind of when I was like, yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal can probably do whatever he wants.
I hate to be that guy, but unfortunately it didn't make the list. It was so close. It's so close. Donnie Darko is so good. It's so good. I'm a huge fan of that movie. It was so close. Now, when you talk to a lot of people about Jake Gyllenhaal, that would generally be like at the top of the list. Like, a lot of people love Donnie Darko. And I remember when I first saw it, I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what is this? Why is there a rabbit or a bunny or whatever the heck this is? Like, what is going on? But I'm a big fan of that movie. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up how it was great that he and Maggie worked together. I would love to see them do another project together. Now that Maggie is behind the camera doing stuff, I would love to see her maybe direct him in something. That would be something I would love to see. And yeah, the movie, it's so interesting when you look at that movie and see where all the actors have gone, you know, like Jake, Maggie, Jenna Malone, Seth Rogen, the girl that plays the little sister, she was Lilo and Stitch, which was really cool.
Beverly Chase.
Yeah.
She was also in the Rain.
Patrick Swayze, very weird seeing him in that. That was very weird. I remember when I saw the movie and I had no idea he was in it. I'm like, why is this guy in the movie? Shouldn't he be in like Dirty Dancing and like all these other movies and everything? So it was very cool seeing him in that. No, I am a fan of Donnie Darko, and I definitely want to watch it more. Like I've only seen it maybe like 2 times, but I haven't seen it
Mhm.
in a very long time. I think since I was in high school, and I'm a fan of it. I do like it, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about it on this episode. So my number one, my favorite, a common thing that you've been hearing throughout this episode is that I love psychological thrillers. I love a good thriller, a noir type of movie. My favorite Jake Gyllenhaal movie is Zodiac.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
I I just think that this movie is like on a whole other level. There are days where I don't know if this is my favorite David Fincher movie or if Social Network is my favorite David Fincher movie. Like the constant shifts back and forth. It's so hard to figure out which ones I love more. And I love his character so much in this. He's a cartoonist. Obviously, for people that don't know what this is about the infamous Zodiac kills throughout the 60s and 70s and everything. And I love how this character starts off as just someone that's just doing his job, being the cartoonist for this paper and the San Francisco Chronicle. I think that's the paper that he writes for. Yep. And once this case starts coming in, like all these letters and all this information come in, he starts to become obsessed with it. Robert Downey Jr. is one of the crime reporters, and then he starts to become attached to Mark Ruffalo, who's the detective behind this case. And I just love seeing the downward spiral that this character goes through, the obsession that he has with solving this case, even though he's just a cartoonist. He has no right to do this. Like this is out of his wheelhouse. Like he's supposed to be drawing doodles for the paper, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. But he becomes so infatuated with this case. It makes him crazy, and it kind of ruins his life when you really think about it. Like his marriage starts to dwindle. His wife, Chloe Savini, becomes suspicious of what he's doing. And the sequence where he goes to that person's place and he's underground, the lights are all weird, and you're like, is this the guy? Is this the guy that's behind it? Like, you don't know. Like, you're left on the edge of your seat watching this. And that's the beautiful thing that David Fincher does with a lot of his movies. He keeps you thinking. You're unsure of where the movie's going to go, even though you may have an idea of what's going to happen. But David Fincher finds a way of really leaving this very grimy, disgusting, thought-provoking feeling when you're watching his stuff. And that's the case with really all of his movies. And I really believe that this movie is not talked about as much as it should be. When you talk about David Fincher, obviously there's so many films to name. Like, he's a fantastic filmmaker. A lot of his films are great. But Zodiac really does not get the attention that I think it deserves. When talking about his catalog and Jake Gyllenhaal's catalog and, Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr., like, Zodiac does not get talked about as much as it should. And this movie has just like been stuck with me for years since I saw it. I remember I was in a class in high school and we were doing forensics, and I was like intrigued to watch this movie. I was like, I kind of want to watch a movie like Zodiac. And then I did. And it was just so cool watching it. And again, it's similar to Wildlife. You felt like you were in the time period. I felt like I was watching a movie that was from that time period. Like, in my head, I'm like, this isn't a movie from 2007. This is a movie from the 70s. Like, it felt like a 10-year thing. It kind of felt like The Boyhood in a way, where you watch it and it goes on from this decade to that decade so seamlessly. And the ending, phenomenal ending. And it's interesting too to see where the Zodiac case has gone now, where it's still, being figured out and everything. I love this movie so much. It's my favorite Jake Gyllenhaal movie. He's incredible in it. Everything about it is great. The script, the directing, the music, Fincher's edits are just on a whole other level. I mean, the guy knocks it out of the park when it comes to his editing, and I adore Zodiac so much. It's my favorite Jake Gyllenhaal movie for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Zodiac that also makes it like such a great film is that very often when it comes to like true crime is we start to get really exploitative with it. And I think that Fincher was really restrained in making this more of a like this is a horror film as well as being like a true story. And I think that he did such an amazing job of balancing both, like, this is actually what happened, and then kind of cutting it off to where it's like, but we're not going to sit here and just be like, let's exploit these people who were murdered type of thing. And I think that his ability to do that then makes kind of everyone's obsession. Because Jake Gyllenhaal's character gets super obsessed. Robert Downey Jr.'s character just becomes inundated with only Zodiac thoughts. And so watching these men start to spiral and go out of control in their own ways is just, I think, so brilliantly done, of like, really trying to understand, who this person is, trying to, Zodiac was known for his ciphers, and just trying to figure out who's behind this now 50-some-year-old mystery. So it was, it's such a great film.
Yeah, and there's a great moment in the movie where he's talking to Chloe Sevigny. He's like, I need to know that it's him. I want to look him in the face and know that it's him. And she's like, why do you need to do this? And he's like, because no one else will. Mm-hmm. Like, he felt that no one else was committed to finding the Zodiac killer. So he was like, I'm going to try to find it, even though I'm not supposed to. Mark Ruffalo kept telling him, stay out of this. This is our case. You do your thing. We do our thing. This is our job, not yours. Like, there were many instances where Mark Ruffalo just told him, he's like, dude, fuck off. Like, stop trying to interfere with the case. And just seeing this downward spiral of all these people, like Jake and Robert Downey Jr. in particular. Like, Robert Downey Jr. was a completely different character when the movie started. And by the end of the movie, that shit crazy. Like, it really took over his life. Like, he wasn't working for the paper anymore. He was just isolating his home. Like, it kind of ruined not only his career, but himself as a person. It's just so great. Like, I'm not really a big like true crime guy. Like, I'm kind of annoyed with the trend of everything like coming out, like all these true crime shows. It's like, that's like the go-to thing now. Whenever you hear a limited series is coming out, it's a true crime thing. Whoop-de-doo, great, whatever. But Zodiac is one of the best examples of true crime brought to screen, and it's done so beautifully. And Fincher, he's one of the best we have worked today. So that is my number one. So now, before we go into our honorable mentions, let's recap our list. So Morgan, what is your list from 5 to 1?
So at number 5, I have Okja, 4, Brokeback Mountain, 3, Wildlife, 2, Stronger, and 1, Donnie Darko.
And to recap my list, coming in number 5 is Enemy, number 4 is Source Code, number 3 Prisoners, number 2 Nightcrawler, and number 1 Zodiac. So that is it with our list. So now going into some of the films that didn't make the cut. Morgan, what are some of your favorite Jake Gyllenhaal films that didn't make the top 5 list that you were really sad to cut out of the list?
Well, we talked about a few of them, from Nightcrawler, Enemy, and Zodiac. I think that those are all great films, and it's hard to put those in to a 5 list. And then some honorable mentions that are kind of completely off the wall. I have Love and Other Drugs, because he and Anne Hathaway worked together in Brokeback Mountain and then reteamed for that one, and they're fantastic together. And the absolute hot mess of a film that I love to watch over and over again, The Day After Tomorrow. That film is so weird and so bonkers, and so, like, that's just not how anything works. But God, I love that movie. And he's in it. He is like, you know what? This is silly. This is dumb, but I'm going to give it everything. And I respect that.
Yeah, The Day After Tomorrow, an interesting thing with that. I remember watching that in 8th grade science class for the first time. And I remember, like, a lot of us were into the movie, that there was a sequence where it was Dennis Quaid and whoever he was with traveling to go find Jake Gyllenhaal. And he like falls through the ice, and then like Dennis Quaid screams, the school bell rings, and then we have to go to lunch. And this girl sitting behind me was like sobbing uncontrollably in the classroom. And I remember that so well. Like, I'll never forget that. The Day After Tomorrow is a pretty fun movie. I'm not really a big Roland Emmerich guy, but that's a pretty fun movie. It's entertaining enough to where you could shut your brain off and you're like, this isn't what would happen, but I mean, it's entertaining enough for me to enjoy.
Yep.
So obviously I have Donnie Darko and Brokeback Mountain and Wildlife on the list. I think a very underappreciated film from him is Brothers with him and Tobey Maguire and Natalie Portman. Jake Gyllenhaal playing a man who just got out of prison. His brother's Tobey Maguire, and they all think that Tobey Maguire died, but he was a prisoner of war. And then he comes back and has this very big amount of PTSD, and that is a performance that I think should have been nominated for an Oscar. Tobey Maguire's performance I thought was fantastic. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, Tobey Maguire can't play anybody but Peter Parker, which is not true. I mean, he's so good in Brothers. He is really great. The freak out scene in the kitchen that you see all over online, that's like really genuinely great acting. And Jake's performance is very understated. It's a very strong performance for sure. I am a big fan of End of Watch with him and Michael Pena from director David Ayer. I remember when I first saw an image from this movie, I'm like, I don't want Jake Gyllenhaal to be bald. I don't like this side of him. But it's, again, another movie to where I wasn't really sold on the marketing. Like, I was like, oh, it's found footage. Oh, no. Like, why are we doing this found footage thing? I mean, it's a very interesting concept. I mean, how often do you see a movie about cops from the perspective of cameras and everything, even though it wasn't entirely handheld found footage type of thing. But that movie, I think it broke my heart more than I was anticipating. Like, that movie actually was really sad in the end. Like, I was really devastated with the outcome of the movie, but it's a beautiful movie about friendship and brotherhood. And I think the performances from them too, him and Michael Pena, like, great back and forth together, really great stuff. I think that so far it's the only David Ayer film that I really like. Fury was okay. Fury was fine, but in terms of his directorial efforts, I can't really think of any other ones I like. I'm a big fan of Training Day, but he didn't direct that, obviously.
Yeah.
I think End of Watch is so underrated. Nobody ever talks about it. It's a great film. I'm going to give a shout out to Nocturnal Animals as well. That film is another one that definitely is very divisive across the board. It's a very difficult film to watch. You need to really be prepared when you walk into it because it's a lot, but I thought it was a very interesting concept done very well with how you see what's inside this book that Amy Adams is reading. And Jake Gyllenhaal, you brought up, there's two versions of him. And he did a great job. I was a little thrown off with his Southern accent at first, but I think he did a really good job. And I think that the performances in that movie, like a huge cast for that movie, Amy Adams, Jake Gyllenhaal, Isla Fisher, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Michael Shannon, Laura Linney. I mean, there's probably so many other people that I'm forgetting to list, and it was directed by a fashion designer. I always found that to be kind of cool how a fashion designer directed that movie. And, in my head, I'm like, this guy feels like he's been making films forever, but he's only made, that was only his second movie.
Yeah.
And like, I would love to see another Tom Ford directed feature, and Jake was great in it. And I'll be upfront. I used to be a big Marvel fan. I like some of their stuff, but I'm tired. I'm getting really tired of their stuff. I love watching comic book movies. I love being immersed in this world, but I'll be honest, I'm starting to get a major fatigue with Marvel. However, when it was announced that he was playing the villain in Spider-Man Far From Home, I got really excited because I thought it was really cool how he was going to be in a comic book movie, because I don't know if you know the story. When they were making Spider-Man 2, right before Spider-Man 2 began filming, Tobey Maguire had injured himself while making Seabiscuit. So he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to do Spider-Man 2 because he had a back injury, which they made a joke about in Spider-Man 2 when he jumps off and he's like, oh, my back. And then they made a joke about it in the new Spider-Man. But Jake Gyllenhaal was actually going to be the person that was going to take over the role of Peter Parker Spider-Man, which I can't even picture at this point. So then when it was announced that he was going to be playing a Spider-Man villain, I'm like, oh, look at that. We're coming full circle. I think it's great. And he was so slimy and very, like, again, he brought that Jake Gyllenhaal charm to that performance. And then when you realize his true colors, you're like, man, he plays evil so well, and he was so over the top at the same time. There was a line where he was like, fire all the drones now, like he screamed from the top of his lungs. It was so funny, like, and I was the only one laughing in my theater. I'm like, why isn't anyone else laughing at this? This is so over the top. But I really enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home, and one of the big reasons was because of him, and I liked his back and forth with Tom Holland. I think they did great together, and I would love to see Jake Gyllenhaal do another comic book type of movie. But I thought it was cool that he got to be a Spider-Man villain. I think that's really exciting that he was able to do that. And it didn't feel. It's one of the better Marvel villains, I think. Like, I liked his character. I thought his story was interesting. I understand the reason why he was doing what he was doing, but Jake Gyllenhaal playing that character just added so much enjoyment to it. And other than that, I mean, I can't really think of any other honorable mentions. Yeah.
I will say that is the only new Spider-Man movie that I've watched. I am very hit and miss with Marvel. So the fact that Jake Gyllenhaal broke my streak of me just not going and seeing a Marvel movie for a while.
I think it broke a lot of people's streak. They saw, Jake Gyllenhaal? Oh, I'll watch.
Yeah. And I just want Jake Gyllenhaal and Uma Thurman to be in like an action camp movie together, because she was the best part of Batman and Robin. Like, she understood that so well. Like, when the Met Gala had the theme of camp, like, everyone should have just dressed up as Poison Ivy. And like that is it. Like, she was camp. And so I think that Jake Gyllenhaal was kind of, because I think it's very difficult to do in a Marvel movie right now, because it has become this multi-bajillion dollar money maker for Disney, that it's really hard to have kind of weird performances and like make campy decisions in this, world. And I think that Jake Gyllenhaal was like sneaking it in there, that I'm like, yes, those two could just collaborate and make the weirdest freaking movie ever. I would be overjoyed.
Yeah, Jake is just one of the best. Like, he really is one of the best. And to go through like some of the stuff he has coming out, the only thing that's listed that he has coming out is a action movie directed by Guy Ritchie, which, that could be either fun or it could be really crappy. Like, you never know. You never know with that man. That man is very like hit or miss for me. Yeah. Like, there are times where I watch a movie that he makes and I'm really entertained, but then there are times where I watch a movie from him and I just want to jump off a bridge. Kane Arthur is one of the most boring movies I think I've ever seen in my life. Like, I never wanted to walk out of a movie more in my life than when I saw Kane Arthur. And I love Charlie Hunnam. I'm a big Sons of Anarchy fan. He's a very good looking dude, but I'll be honest, the style that was in that movie did not work for Kane Arthur. I like Sherlock Holmes. I like those movies with Robert Downey Jr. Those are fun movies. I'm bummed that they never made a Sherlock Holmes 3, but Jake Gyllenhaal is one of those guys that, like, I feel like he's kind of picky with his roles. I don't really see Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor that would just pick someone just for the money, just for the paycheck. But, like, if he wants to do this action movie with Guy Ritchie, sure, why not? I thought Ambulance was a really fun time. And Jake Gyllenhaal was so ridiculous in it. Honestly, he was kind of bad, but he went in with his performance. I thought it was entertaining enough to where I was entertained enough. But also, my thing is, why hasn't Jake Gyllenhaal done a musical? I mean, that guy has a brilliant voice, brilliant singing voice. Like, I sent you that clip from Sunday in the Park with George. And I remember when I saw that clip online, I was like, where did this come from? Spider-Man Far From Home could have been a musical because you have Tom Holland, Zendaya, and Jake Gyllenhaal. It could have been a musical. Like, it could have been a musical. I mean, why couldn't they, what they're doing with Joker 2, why couldn't they do that with Spider-Man Far From Home? Why couldn't that be a musical? Like, I mean,
put him in a I mean, if they want to do a concert version of Sunday in the Park with George, or he would be great in a version of Company. I would love to see him sing Being Alive.
Oh my God. He would be, if they were to make a feature adaptation of either of those shows, they should hands down cast him. I'm shocked he hasn't done a movie musical. I'm like really genuinely shocked that he hasn't done a movie musical, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like thinking of movie musicals that have come out in the last few years. Which one would he fit in? Like, can you imagine him in La La Land? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, maybe in something like, and I would not recast Chris Pine, but something like Into the Woods. Mm-hmm. I think you could have had like Jake Gyllenhaal in
another Sondheim musical.
Basically just put him in Sondheim.
Anything musical. Sondheim.
That's him. But I mean, like, yeah, I think it also depends on like what musicals they're trying to adapt. Like, don't put him, no cats, none of that. Glad he wasn't, I need to be in a movie musical enough to be in Cats. So yeah, I would be interested. I know that like Greta Gerwig one day wants to do a musical. I think that would be great.
Great parent. Yeah.
Even if she's behind the camera, like I think that she would just have the best time with him.
Can you imagine her directing a Sondheim adaptation? Like, can you imagine just how cool that would be?
I mean, based off of, she was in a Whit Stillman film called Damsels in Distress,
mm-hmm.
and it was really quirky and fun. And I think that she would be able to like emulate that energy and elevate it to like any type of musical, whether it would be an adaptation of a current musical or someone writing a musical for it. I would love it.
I would love that pairing. I would watch that pairing in a heartbeat. Like, I would be there day one. Like, Greta Gerwig and Jake Gyllenhaal could literally be in the movie about the toilet being created, and I would absolutely watch it no matter what. Like, that's just a pairing I would watch in a heartbeat. Did you ever see the clip of him on SNL like 15 years ago where he sung the song from Dreamgirls?
Yes,
that is a phenomenal skit. That was an awesome opening. Like, his vocal range in that was like, I'm like, oh my God. Maybe he should have played the role instead of Jennifer Hudson. It could have gotten him an Oscar. He would have won the Oscar.
I mean, he just, yeah. And I mean, I would love to see him in some type of like fun musical. If John Cameron Mitchell wants to redo Hedwig, wouldn't be mad with Jake.
Oh my God.
Hedwig.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. What other musicals do I actually like? If they had to redo Little Shop of Horrors, he would be the perfect dentist.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I totally forgot. He's actually going to be in the Disney movie coming out later this year, which sounds really cool. I'm definitely intrigued by that. But yeah, closing thoughts on Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, what can you say? He's one of the best actors working today. Gives 110% to all the performances he's in. He's a very beautiful man, but he's also a very talented man, and he's a very kind-hearted man. He seems like a very down-to-earth guy. He seems like the kind of guy that I would just love to grab a beer with, grab a dinner with, and just chat about movies and life, and just, I would love to see Jake Gyllenhaal in person. Now, when I went to go see The Lost Daughter at the New York Film Festival, he was at that screen, and I'm like, at first I was like, oh, I want to see Jake, but I love Matt. I sat 10 feet away from Maggie, so I was good enough there. I love both of them. So
that's great.
But knowing that I was in the same room as Jake, I was like, okay, I'm satisfied enough.
Yeah. And I mean, also special shout out to, I don't know if you know Eric Anderson,
the
editor of Awards Watch. He is a huge Jake Gyllenhaal fan. And so shout out to him and our mutual love of this incredible talent, and the guy whose picture I had in my locker when I was 13 years old, Jake Gyllenhaal.
So Morgan, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so glad that I got to talk to you about Jake Gyllenhaal and why he's one of the best and his films and everything. So really, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and for letting me talk about my childhood crush.
Of course.
Has been a delightful way to spend a Saturday with you.
Absolutely. So where could the people find you online? Where could people find Cinema Gals? plug your work, where can people find the Morgan Roberts?
Yeah, you can follow the Untitled Cinema Gals project on Twitter and Instagram at Cinema Gals. I'm doing some weird projects coming up on there. Chels right now is really deep in Drag Race. So we have just some fun stuff coming up. And then, if you follow me on Twitter at MSML Roberts, that is where I tend to talk about Xanadu and share all of my work for different articles and stuff that I'm writing.
Cool stuff. So you guys can follow the show on all social medias, Twitter and Instagram. We have a YouTube channel as well that we'll link down in the info. If you want an audio only version of this podcast, we're available on all podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. And you guys can follow me on all social medias, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Bryan Suffield. So once again, Morgan, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad that I got to talk to you today. I've been a fan of your work for a while, and I'm just so happy that I got to talk to a fellow film geek, someone who's clearly very passionate, and your passion for film is one of the reasons why I just love doing this show so much.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you to say. Appreciate you letting me come on.
Absolutely. And until next time, guys, we'll see you on the very next episode of Film Fragments. Take care, everybody.